Thank you, guys. Good morning, church family. It's good to be back. I've been man down the last 2 weeks. You know, they say there's one thing worse than coronavirus, and that's man flu. And I had a good case of the man flu the last 2 Sundays. Thankfully, Graham was able to step in for me last Sunday, and or the 2 Sundays ago, and then the guys, with their worship session last Sunday was a real blessing to us as well. So I'm good to be back. I'm excited. And I want to start off with this first question. Is anyone tired? Tired of COVID-19, face masks and hand sanitizers? Tired of all the worries and concerns of our economy and where our country is going? Is anyone feeling exhausted? Well, 2 weeks ago, as I was preparing a message for the Sunday, I felt quite exhausted and overwhelmed. And on Wednesday morning, I woke up feeling sick. I spent the next few days in bed. And as I lay in bed, I went to the Lord in prayer and I told him how I felt. I said to the Lord, I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed. And he said to me, it's because I haven't rested in him. He said to me, you haven't kept my Sabbath. Most people have their Sabbath or their day of rest on a Sunday, but because I work on a Sunday, I usually have my Sabbath on a Monday. Now, before lockdown, I had a great routine. I would spend my entire Monday with the Lord. I would pray, read the Word, spend time with Jesus, worship Jesus. I also make sure not to do any work during that day. It was my day of rest and refreshment. However, at the beginning of lockdown, the kids were at home and we had to help them with homework and do Zoom sessions, and this cut short my admin, Bible study and preparation time, and so I thought it was best to do some work on Mondays, otherwise I didn't have enough time in the week. Sadly, this bad decision caught up with me. Maybe you are feeling tired, maybe you are feeling run down and in desperate need of rest. And so this is the sermon this morning. I command you to rest. Some of you may remember that the word of the year for 2018 was rest. God takes rest very seriously. In fact, it's one of the 10 commandments, which is found in Exodus 20, verses 3 to 17. But just before God gives the 10 commandments, he reminds his people of this. In Exodus 20, verse 2, he says, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. By the time we get to Exodus 20, after walking through the plagues and crossing the Red Sea, we're prone to forget the impossible workload that was shackled to Israel's feet. Therefore, God reminds us, as a preface to the 10 commandments, that he is the Lord who brought them out of slavery. So what was Egypt like again? It was bricks and more bricks, all day, every day. It was work, work, work. An infatuation with the bottom line, with no restraints on how to get there. It was about production and strict commerce. And a world not too unlike sectors of our society today. God had rescued the Israelites from that kind of lifestyle, and now he was giving them 10 commandments to follow. And here is the 4th commandment found in Exodus 20, verse 8 to 11. God says, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servants, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Our English word Sabbath means rest in Hebrew. However, this day of rest is required to be holy, set apart to honor the Lord, not to play a round of golf or binge on your favorite TV series on Netflix. By the way, this is the longest commandment. God spent more time, more words to explain this commandment than any other. Now, many people associate the Sabbath with Old Testament law and feel they don't need to keep that commandment anymore. As followers of Jesus, we aren't required to follow the Old Testament laws, but the wisdom of those laws is enduring, and the law of the Sabbath is pure gold. Keeping the Sabbath was a burden, but today Jesus has made it a blessing. We don't keep the 10 Commandments to be saved. We are saved by grace through Jesus, but there are blessings if we keep the 10 Commandments, and there are consequences if we don't. It makes sense to us when we consider commandments like do not murder, or do not steal, or do not commit adultery. But what about rest? It seems like Christians today believe we should keep 9 of the 10 Commandments. However, there are reasons why God commands us to rest. Number 1, it gives God the opportunity to provide for us. Exodus 16, verse 23 to 26 says, "This is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow will be a day of complete rest, a holy Sabbath day set apart for the Lord. So bake or boil as much as you want today, and set aside what is left for tomorrow." So they put some aside until morning, just as Moses had commanded. And in the morning the leftover food was wholesome and good, without maggots or odor. Moses said, "Eat this food today, for today is a Sabbath day dedicated to the Lord. There will be no food on the ground today. You may gather the food for 6 days, but the 7th day is the Sabbath." God had miraculously provided bread from heaven. It would rain down manna, and the Israelites would gather the food. But God said He will not provide any food on day 7. So don't even go outside and try to collect anything. In other words, don't try work on the Sabbath, because I won't provide for you on that day. I've provided enough for you on the 6 days. It's meant to be a holy day, a day where you honor me. And in verse 27, it says, "Some of the people went out anyway on the 7th day, but they found no food. The Lord asked Moses, 'How long will these people refuse to obey my commands and instructions?' They must realize that the Sabbath is the Lord's gift to you. That is why He gives you a 2-day supply on the 6th day, so there will be enough for 2 days. On the Sabbath day, you must each stay in your place. Do not go out to pick up food on the 7th day." So the people did not gather any food on the 7th day. The Sabbath is a gift from God. Slaves don't get days off. It's only kings and queens, it's royalty who get that privilege. God redeemed His people from slavery and has given them a gift of rest. During the week, we are slaves to schedule, commitments, appointments, and deadlines. For 1 day a week, we are free. God says, "I will provide for you and take care of you as you honor me." The principle of the Sabbath is a glorious picture of God's self-sufficiency and unwavering ability to provide. As God's people, our rest becomes a decisive, concrete, visible way of opting for and aligning with the God of rest. One of the most head-turning, soul-stirring moves we make as witnesses to God's holiness is when we stop. Our stopping work is our way of saying enough. Life is not all about making money and having a successful career. we can trust the Lord of rest, who came to give us rest, and say, because of who he is, we can stop making bricks. Number 2, the Sabbath gives us an opportunity to rest and be refreshed. Exodus 31, verse 12 to 17. Sorry, I think I've doubled up on the scripture. But anyway, it says, the Lord then gave these, hang on, where am I? Okay, I found it. The Lord then gave these instructions to Moses. Tell the people of Israel, be careful to keep my Sabbath day, for the Sabbath is a sign of the covenant between me and you from generation to generation. It is given so you may know that I am the Lord, who makes you holy. You must keep the Sabbath day, for it is a holy day for you. Anyone who desecrates it must be put to death. Anyone who works on that day will be cut off from the community. Do you notice those powerful words? It tells us we get to know the Lord through rest. It also tells us the Sabbath was a sign of the covenant. The Sabbath was a sign to the world. Israel was the only nation who would rest for one day a week. So when Israel would thrive, people would say, how is that possible? We work for 7 days. They only work for 6. God's blessing must be upon them. God must be providing for them. And so God would be glorified. And in verse 15, it says, you have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the 7th day must be a Sabbath day of complete rest, a holy day dedicated to the Lord. Anyone who works on the Sabbath must be, put to death. The people of Israel must keep the Sabbath day by observing it from generation to generation. This is a covenant obligation for all time. It is a permanent sign of my covenant with the people of Israel. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, but on the 7th day he stopped working and was refreshed. Have you ever thought about that? Why did God need rest? It tells us God rested and was refreshed. But God is omnipotent. God is all-powerful. How can he be refreshed? A God who never gets tired, who never sleeps. This word refreshed in Hebrew means took breath. God breathed in. Now, what was God doing for 6 days? God was creating. Remember, God created the earth and everything in it with his words. When you speak, you breathe out. He also breathed into man. So for 6 days, God was breathing out. And on the 7th day, he breathed in and he was refreshed. You know, we often say, I just need to catch my breath. If God rested, then how much more important is it for us to rest? Number 3, there are consequences if we don't rest. Have you ever wondered why God would get so upset when Israel forgot to practice the Sabbath? In Ezekiel 20, God confronts Israel for this very thing. And he says in Ezekiel 20, verse 16, for they had rejected my regulations, refused to follow my decrees, and violated my Sabbath days. Their hearts were given to their idols. We can only get to know God when we rest, as we read earlier, when we are still. Psalm 46 verse 10 tells us, be still and know that I am God. We enlarge our awareness of God through rest. So when we don't rest, we forget God, and that has deadly side effects. If we won't worship God in rest, then our work will soon develop into the worship of some idol. Self-importance, control, money, or recognition. That's exactly what Israel had done. By working without Sabbath rest, the work of their hands became the idols of their hearts. By forgetting to stop, we forget God. If we won't stop to experience the glory of God in rest, we won't be able to glorify Him in work either. So, why do people struggle to rest or struggle to keep the Sabbath? If you imagine spending one whole day resting, does it make you feel anxious? Would it make you feel guilty? That guilt can reveal if you trust God to provide for you or not. Another reason is the world has taught us that being busy is good and resting is laziness. But let me tell you, that's exactly what the devil wants you to believe. If the devil can't make you bad, he will make you busy. Too busy to spend time with Jesus. Busyness always wars against your awareness of God. Now, there were 4 things in the Old Testament that required death. Okay, number 1, it was murder. It was adultery. It was a rebelling against your parents. Should remind my kids of that one. And the 4th one was not keeping the Sabbath. Now, why would not keeping the Sabbath be up there with murder and adultery? Remember, there is a principle behind each commandment. God is teaching us that if we don't rest, if we don't take time out to be refreshed, then we are putting ourselves to death. Adam Mabry shares his testimony about a busy season in his life when he never took time to rest. He said he says in the story, it's 1 o'clock in the morning and I'm painting my hallway baseboards. You probably don't paint that late at night. Normally, neither do I. But it was a relentlessly busy season, and I was convinced that this was the best and only time to do it. I wasn't happy to be that busy, of course. To have just bought a home which was built only a decade or 2 after the Civil War ended, to be remodeling it, and to have a baby that refused to sleep, and to have a demanding job. In fact, I was angry. I'd fallen into the busy trap. I'm an achiever. Some might say an overachiever. In my immature bent toward achieving, I didn't stop, ever. Stopping was a missed opportunity for accomplishment. Rest is for the weak or the dead, I would say to myself. Not surprisingly, when your heart is saying things like that, your hands won't stop finding things to do. Things like painting your baseboards after midnight. The busy trap is the self-defeating spiral of non-stop action that feeds on the belief that restfulness is weakness. But rest is not weakness. Rest is an irreducible ingredient for the life that enjoys God. I'd love to tell you that I had a eureka moment that night, that I put down the paintbrush, rushed downstairs, shook off my silliness and went to bed. But my story had a darker few chapters still to go. Pages filled with more work, more church, more doing, and less of God. Then I hit a hard depression. I achieved, and it almost killed me. So believe me when I say, for the glory of God, rest. Charles Spurgeon says, rest time is not waste time. It is economy to gather fresh strength. It is wisdom to take occasional furlough. In the long run, we shall do more by sometimes doing less. And number 4, there are blessings when we rest. God's rest is not only a rest from physical or mental activity, but a rest from striving in our own strength and wisdom. It means to rest from worry, anxiety, and fear, and learn to relax and be at peace and calm, knowing God is in control. Rest allows us to experience peace and to enjoy life. A quote from Adam Mabry, the story that we just read, he said this. He said, rest is an irreducible ingredient for the life that enjoys God. A 55-year-old pastor in Dallas also shared a story that I read online recently where he was 40 years old. He was rushed to hospital because he was dying. His internal organs were shutting down, and he cried out to God and said, "Why are you doing this to me?" God replied and said, "I'm not doing this to you. You are doing this to yourself." This pastor had worked non-stop for many years, and now it had finally caught up with him. He said to the Lord, "If you will have mercy on me from this day forward, I promise to rest one day a week." He soon felt strength come back into his body and was discharged the next day. 15 years later, he is happy and healthy and has never been back to hospital since. God made us, and God knows that we all need rest. Rest is a gift from Him, and because of His love for us, He commands us to rest. In Psalm 23 verse 1, where it tells us, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing." And then in verse 2 it says this, it says, "He makes me lie down in green pastures." Now, when I originally read that, it tells us that if the Lord is our shepherd, He makes me lie down. I thought, that's a bit strange language. That's quite strong. He makes me lie down. But if God is your shepherd, then He will make you lie down and rest in the green pastures. Rest is not a suggestion. It is a commandment from the Lord. In closing, Hebrews 4 verse 9 to 11 tells us, "So there is a special rest still waiting for the people of God. For all who have entered into God's rest have rested from their labors, just as God did after creating the world. So let us do our best to enter that rest." Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." All we need to do is to go to Jesus, and He will give us rest. Chuck Swindoll says, "In place of our exhaustion and spiritual fatigue, God will give us rest. All He asks is that we come to Him, that we spend a while thinking about Him, meditating on Him, talking to Him, listening in silence, occupying ourselves with Him, totally and thoroughly lost in the hiding place of His presence." Let's pray.